Yeah,
Especially,
I
Hi,
think
host
Effie
Eric
is
here,
big on
host
that.
of Talking to Face People, and we are having a rollicking discussion about my sex thing. And I'm sorry we're going to get a little bit of echo here. Let me see if I can find some headphones. Maybe we won't have the echo. Will these ones work? Let's find out. So, my point is, of course, that you guys are talking about an agreement that you guys don't have neuroses about sex or have not experienced being neurotic about sex. I have in the past
maybe
at
don't.
times, and at times not. And my position is that the types who are likely to be neurotic about sex, NTPs, NTJs probably, and that the reason is because, and ENTJs least, ENTJs least because they they link to SE, which is physical action. Even though they go through TE, it links a lot better than INTJs does. Anyway, the point is, my position is that in fact there are types that express sexuality in one way or the other. That there are a finite and distinct set of ways in which humans express sexuality. After all, it's not that complicated an act, really, if you think about it. And and that we can taxonomy that and explain it as expressions of FE, FI, SI, and SE, some combination of those things. Look, you can't have sex without SEing, that is to say, taking a physical action. And you can't have sex
Yeah.
without it having some sort of impact on motivations and emotions of some sort, whether it's about your own personal
And you're gonna
emotions
FE too.
or whether it's FE, whether you're, no matter how distant you are from them, and even if you're being a dick about it, that's got FE implications. You cannot help have those kind of implications. Might they have TE and other kind of implications, TI implications? Sure. But that's not really something that's considered in the physical act. In other words, the physical act can't happen without manifesting those four functions. It can happen without manifesting NE or NI or TI or TE because I mean, a little bit of TE, I guess, is necessary if you know how to stick something in a hole. But,
Mm, for me, big time.
okay, well, I guess you could imagine TE
I
being
mean,
used in a sex, but the point is, it's not an expression of human sexuality, really, that occurs through that modality. So the point is, those other things,
well, neither is this.
neither is what?
SE is not an expression of humanity. It's an acknowledgement that it's in the physical world.
Well,
Well,
But
if you're doing a
it's
physical act, you've got to be doing SE, right?
right, it's the actual following
right.
through on
But
the
I mean,
physical act.
it's yeah. So yeah, there is necessarily a physical component, but arguably it can be more metaphysical than physical. I'm not
Absolutely.
gonna make that
Well, like in
argument,
the sense of role play, right?
You could imagine having an FE thing where two people are talking, and if somehow they were like 15 years old or something, maybe or 13, that one or the other of them could make the other ejaculate without ever either of them touching themselves or the other person. It's conceivable, but then you're talking about bypassing SE into SI, right? SI and FE. You're using
Right.
and or descriptive SE, like you're describing physical body parts or something in ways that evoke the SE experience of seeing it in person. Regardless, you're not any is in a supporting role no matter what. TI, if present at all, is in a supporting role. You can't extract TI completely from FE,
I
and
don't think
I
TI is present at all.
but look, you can't extract TI from FE completely because FE uses the TI framework to do its work, and TI considers FE things as objects when doing its work. They're implicit to one another. That's why they're linked. And so it's like the TI aspect of it is very much dampened down, obviously in sex, but the FE aspect of it, it has consistency within its own metrics, so it kind of utilizes a certain TI framework anyway. But basically, TI and TE don't have a role because good sex isn't an algorithm you execute. You
Mm,
can have bad sex that works like that. I mean, or you might have. I mean, it can be, but even then, it's a unique and particular event of
right.
repetition. So it's like the thing about it is wholly particularist, wholly subjectivist, and wholly experiential. It's not it's not something that has any like resonance with a human being sexually except through the only objective way to resonate with somebody sexually is through FE.
I think sex is such a complex act that you tend to use almost all of your cognitive functions to utilize the act.
I second that.
I agree. I'm not disputing that people use other functions. I'm saying that there are ones that are expressing the core elements of human sexuality in either through the experience of the own body, the experience of the other body, or through the feeling of individual valuing, or through extroverted feeling. Okay, but those are the four ways that you experience sexuality. Now, obviously, NE and NI are objective functions. NE goes like, well, I'm going to make meaning about this.
Hmm.
Well, that's great. You're making meaning about FE concerns or about FI concerns, but really that's secondary to the physical act. I mean, the experience of the physical act proceeding from beginning to end is a matter that is beyond objectification, really. You can't meaningfully make time objects about it and parse it out. To the extent that you can, you do so by noting that that limitation applies to the cognitive functions as well. That the cognitive functions require you to parse shit out and see things as an order of operations like TE, or as consistent with other objects like TI, or as something that you make objective meaning about like NE, or as something that you objectively know the single best course of action with like NI, that those things are too distant from the sex act to be core to it, that they're ancillary or supporting functions.
So
I think that it's misleading about the actual experience of sex to parse it out along such black and white lines, or so
But then there's no
precisely.
point in talking about
I
any
mean,
of this. There's no point
what
in talking about
is
anything. All of life is that fluid
no,
and
no, no, no,
it's an
no, no,
experience?
no.
It's an experience that I want to say something. Taylor, what Taylor said earlier was perfect. It's about that. If there's anybody that's going to be creating narratives, it's us. And what the one thing that's going to catch you some flack, Eric, and what I think is at the heart of this when you make your videos, explaining your take on everything you've been discussing for years, is that you obviously clearly have your own experience being the strongest framework in giving the most and being the most informative as to your understanding of the. I mean,
Yes, yes.
it's
Okay, look, but
and
you're positioning it wrong. It's not that.
I'm
It's
not.
not my framework. It's the thing that
It's
provided me the
it's your
data points. Stop and listen.
it's your
It's that
experience
which
of sex.
provided me the data
Nick,
points.
you talked. Let him talk.
I
It's
know.
that which provided me the data points that caused me to intuit the structure that actually represents reality. Now, here's the thing. It's not critically important to me at all that the ENTPs feel as though they are being adequately flattered by this portrayal of things. Nor is it my intention at all that ENTPs feel as though they are being adequately coddled in their insecurities. That's not my point. The point is that there are certain kinds of expressions of insecurity that are typical of certain populations and certain types that are necessarily the case. Now, to the extent that those people have those kind of neuroses, why is it that they are more likely to have those kind of neuroses and somebody who's like an ESFP is not? Well, here's my reasoning on it. And it makes perfect sense that the types that are going to be more likely to be neurotic, not all of them are going to express that, obviously. You can still get to sex, even if you got two ancillary supporting functions before a core function, core sex node. It makes perfectly good sense, and it's as good a taxonomy and explanation as any I've ever heard. And more importantly, I'm in the business of making explanations for things. So yeah, let me tell you three of the key data points: having sex with an FE
My
dom for a
take
long
on
time, having sex with an FI dom briefly, and then having sex with an FE second slot person. In those orders, caused me to understand, at least from my
you're
personal
missing.
perspective, data points that I could then intuit the rest of the system in. Then you test the system with consistency with itself and other axioms, and you test it in the real world by trial and error.
You're missing my point. My point is that you're supporting a theory. You have a theory. You want to support your theory. Use data outside of your realm of experience, and that is any theory.
I've addressed this point a million times. Those empirics are not any more valid than my logical analysis, and I can explain exactly why.
Are we okay? No. Stop. First of all, are we arguing the whole taxonomy? Because I'm only addressing the sex part. I'm not addressing the whole taxonomy.
Let's back up to the empirics point. It is true that you can falsify my model with empirics. That's what empirics are there for, to falsify it. But we're not at the stage of falsification because you're not arguing that it's been falsified or that it will be falsified. You're arguing only against what I'm presenting to you as a case. The only thing you can reasonably argue against is its logical fitness and its watertightness. Is it consistent within itself? Is it consistent with what we know generally as axiomatic experiential truths? And is it consistent enough with existing understandings of these functions to have reference points outside of it in terms of abstract models? Yeah, all of those things. Yeah. So you can test the case. What you can't do is say empirics that don't exist falsify it.
Why are you treating your
empirics are observation
and like you have to prove it wrong? You got to prove your taxonomy or your sex claims, not the other way around.
I'm saying this is an intuitive, ideated taxonomy that makes good logical sense and holds water. If you don't like the idea that if you don't like the idea that it's not yet supported by empirics, then go do some lab testing or something, or wait for some to falsify it. Either way, in the absence of those empirics, is not evidence of anything, including a problem with my taxonomy.
Well, what about just this pure statistical support versus non? Like, what about the pure numbers right here? You presented it. This is the first discussion you've had about it with other people.
Hasty generalization. There's a total of 4 people here who are ENTPs.
I'm not falling into debate technicalities with you. That's not what I'm trying to do at all.
But you already agreed.
Don't fucking keep arguing through my sentences. All right.
You already agreed that the population is more likely to be neurotic.
Eric, let him finish his thought before you counter.
I'm so fucking tired of you not listening to what comes out of my mouth when I disagree with some of your bullshit. Do you want to hear it or not?
I hear every single thing you just say.
You can go right on having your fucking fantasy if you want to. Then don't ask for input.
I hear every single thing you say and respond to it all.
No, you don't. You don't hear when you're talking. Okay. I don't even remember what I was going to say. Basically, just because you can make something logical doesn't mean it holds water. By dividing something out this finitely, because you can speak from having had sex with 3 women, doesn't make it true for the world. It just means that you're smart enough to move variables around to explain things, even if they're explained poorly.
Okay, but here's the thing, Taylor. Here's the thing.
Well,
they're actually explained really well. You haven't given an example of one that's explained poorly. You haven't provided a preferable alternative, and empirics that don't exist can't disprove or prove anything.
Well, the thing is, he has offered alternatives by seconding what I've said, but I mean, it's still your point of view does hold some water. It's just not complete. You know what I mean? The natural act of itself is so complex that it's not going to be boiled down to 4 different functions.
That's not a model, and it's not an alternative in the same units. That's the absence of any explanation. That's not a better explanation. It's the absence of an explanation.
What I see you do is trying to defend something rather than allowing a critique and a furthering of the understanding.
That's not true. You guys aren't critiquing the actual thing. You're saying it's
okay.
It's an approximation, therefore it's not exact.
You're not letting it happen. You're not letting it happen. It's the state of mind you're in. You're not in listening mode. Let's figure out how to
Nick, I hear everything you say and respond to it all.
Okay, Eric, I think that if you added another cognitive function to each one of those, it would probably be closer. Like, for example, the intuitive types might be any FE.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, look, the thing is, I agree. It depends on the individual person, which is why in the first one, the pairing of the types, right? So I explained this in the first video how, in fact, ISFJ, even though they have SI and FE, they go in SI because they're SI first, whereas INFJ has it in the first two slots, but it's just the FE and not the SI, so they go in the FE category. Because NI doesn't count. I explained all this shit.
Right.
I know you explained it, but you're creating. I don't agree, and none of us, the three of us, also don't. All three of us don't agree with the picture that you're drawing out of the parts. So, can you? Are you? What is what you're saying about the functions necessarily wrong? No. Are you then adding them together and building something that's a clearer picture? No, well, you're not. It's okay, reducing it.
I understand that's your claim. You have yet to give me a single reason why not, except that it's not perfect.
I will do it right now if you stop talking every time that I catch a breath. Okay? Ready? If you look at how somebody uses their functions, like an ENTP, for example, when they're at their best, you get someone who's fluid, socially charming, I'm trying new things, but also grounded in reality. Like Robert Downey Jr. is an excellent example. Now, if you apply that same attitude while you're having sex, you get a different experience than if you're crunching through your TI to try to find how to get your FI or whatever is down there that you're not supposed to use. Whatever your cognitive functions are that you use, naturally, the higher up, the more natural it feels, the better it is. Sex experience is different with different types. I've had sex with ENFJs. It's fucking weird. They're watching me too much.
I mean, right? Hell yeah.
Yes.
So, does your NE express in isolation?
No, it doesn't. Nothing ever expresses in isolation, really. But that's what I'm saying, basically.
Okay, so then you're not really saying anything about my specific taxonomy. You're just saying that it always breaks down because everyone uses everything.
I'm saying that it does not help it does not clarify understanding of either sex or cognitive functions. It just muddies them both, but because there's no strict,
but you haven't given
there's no equational flaws.
Your reason continues to be the same reason, which is that it collapses down to everything mushes out, right?
I'm saying that you're trying to parse things that don't parse clearly to have any understanding. What are you trying to solve here? Because it's not solved.
It's the same argument you've made every single time. I heard it the first time you made it.
I don't understand what your claim is, though. What is say a single claim about the sex thing that you're trying to make? Because I'm saying why it's wrong.
The human sexuality expresses as 4 units of sex, namely FE units, FI units, SI units, and SE units, or SI and SE combined with FI and FE, you know?
Right, your initial claim.
Other functions are ancillary or supporting. You don't need any of the other functions involved at all to have sex.
But when FE and NE, so if you're having good sex, you're bouncing your FE and NE off of each other, or FE boosts NE. I don't know how it works out because I haven't taxonomied out the human sexual experience.
That's like NE FE, right, with SE.
You're ideating in FE units, okay? So you're not checking your woman for validity. You're checking her for, if she's being submissive or if she's hot or those sort of things.
I don't know. All I know is that the way it was received and the way it sounded is not at all consistent with the way I've experienced sex. Now, is it different with different types? Yeah. And I think having sex with an FE dom, like I said, FE dom is too much.
Okay, but I point out though, Taylor, you haven't provided any counter examples. You haven't given me any examples of things that aren't FE or FI or SI or SE.
I have given you examples though that he has agreed with.
What was your example?
Yes.
For example, ENTPs would probably experience more NE-FE and probably intuitive types in general during a sex act.
Well, ENTP, sure, because FE is the first sex node and NE is their dominant function. So naturally,
right. So I mean, it wouldn't be dominated by one
in accessing their first primary sex node.
Yeah. So I mean, what I'm mainly saying is like your diagram. I think the positions are working well, but it's not perfect. It needs to be refined, as in probably using 2 cognitive functions for each set.
It's not very detailed right now because it's a basic diagram, But the thing is, if you look at this one, it shows you how these are the nodes, and these are things about sex that are abstract and or order of operations. So TE, order of operations, NI, single best way. If you're an INTJ, then you have this particular, truly unique, subjective, experiential thing, which is FI driven, which is dependent on the mood and the moment of the persons involved. And this poor INTJ is trying to figure out the single best way to have sex with them, and then how to do so effectively. But of course, that's going to run afoul of FI's momentary particularism. This is impossible. Let me just express this. This is a possible problem. This is not the absolute problem.
I actually think that diagram is better than the one you used in the video. Except I don't know about TI. Video. Is TI even really used in sex?
Well, it says here, like the ISTP, why abstractly taking action X might work is TI linking to SE. Why abstractly these ideas I've been having might be fun is TI and NE, which then goes down to FE to say, well, what are the ideas about? They're about FE shit. Now, if you try to exclude NE and TI some more from the equation, you end up moving into SI sex, which is much more just experiential with less narrative involved in it. FI sex, it matters a lot that you're feeling each other in the moment. Like, before you have sex, you stare lovingly at each other for a while or
something. First of all, okay, let me swap this around. FI is not necessarily always nice or caring.
Right.
FI can be insanely selfish and just as narcissistic as FE.
I wanted to distinguish between FI, FE,
I don't understand how SI. I don't understand how SI is particularly a sex node. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying it doesn't strike me as a sex node at all.
Because
it's a sex node.
Because you're seeking it, and your woman has it at polar. No, she has it.
TI would be involved in sex if TI would be involved in sex if you're communicative, right?
Yeah, I'd say TI is involved in my sex.
Okay, but look.
Like if you're like, no, do it this way. No, do it that way. This way is better. Like if you do it this way, we do it that way.
FE and TI are incontrovertibly linked. FE uses a TI framework to answer its own FE consistency questions, which are not used on the deductive validity thing, but it approximates it for FE. Okay, so the thing is, yeah, TI is always involved to some extent, but it's using FE units, FI units, okay, or SI units that it's just enjoying the way shit feels without thinking about what it means, or SE units just like, I'm just gonna start rubbing her and push her over and she's hot, I'm gonna fuck her like that, right? So
I mean, that can be FI sex though. That can be FI sex and TI for us. I mean, just everything is so linked. But yeah, that can certainly be FI sex.
Okay, but
if it's genuine aggression.
FISE, you got FISE. Now listen, I had sex with an ISFP and INFP, and before ESFJ was my wife, my previous wife, and now I'm with an ISFJ. Okay, so I got to have both FIs, and I can tell you it's the same idea except it's noted out. For ISFP, it's like, I like you this afternoon, so the afternoon is going to end with sex. For INFP, it's like, I like you after having observed you for 400 hours. So now I'm going to make sure we have sex.
No, INFPs can also be like, I mean, INFPs naturally exist through the TE is accomplished through basically empathy. Their empathetic impact can certainly be a sex motivator.
Well, look, they are FI DOMs. They are FI DOMs, and I will point this out, that if you are an FI DOM who prefers the metaphysical aspect of FI, you're more likely to be an INFP. And if you prefer the physical aspect of FI, you're more likely to be an ISFP. And what that boils down to is, INFPs in general are going to look more towards multiple instances of feelings over time and projections about their feelings, and ISFPs are going to be more about their feelings right now and not so aware of how their feelings ought to guide their behavior regarding how their feelings are going to be later,
What's an ISFJ like?
Neither ISFP nor INFPs are particularly loving, making love. Both of them certainly can bypass that for either SE or, I guess, FETE reasons.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, they go to SI, and INFP goes to SI after the FI, and ISFP goes to SE after the FI. So ISFP is a more fully sexual person than INFP. INFP, after they default, if the FI approach isn't how they're going with it, then they should go with it with an SI approach, which is it's more selfish. It's a selfish approach in the sense like, no, you make me come the way I want you to.
Right, but so the way it applies to your original diagram, the video that I responded to, and probably through to the following things, I think, is that it actually doesn't give a clear understanding of how it's like to have sex with an introverted feeler.
Well, I mean, I agree. I didn't parse out the different types of introverted feelers as well as I could have, but it was a short video. It was an introduction to the concept, and the fact that the subsets within weren't parsed out is not a critique, really.
I mean, at the very headline, the make love FI quadrant doesn't fit to FI DOMs.
Okay, well, that's a good. See, now there's a first legitimate reason that you would have for saying that's a critique of the problem. That's the first one.
What's the reason?
No FI DOMs fit the stereotype or the node label of making love.
Except I don't think
both of them are totally capable.
I don't think that's number one. I don't think that's true. But number two, even if it is true, the fact that they have alternative means of accessing sex is naturally the case. ISFP especially is going to be very SE approaching, just sort of like do the deed. And INFP, well, they've got the FI DOM's ability to turn on and off their own feelings. If they're turning off their own feelings, my position is they'll default down to SI. So that's my position on it. It's all consistent with what I originally said. And now the thing is, is making love the right term? Well, making FI, it's not necessarily love. I think in the ideal FI relationship it is. I think that FI has lots of expressions of feelings that aren't love that could be translated into sex. I don't claim to understand how FI DOMs have sex well, but I do claim that it's a node and that it is the alternative to FE in terms of that expression of human sexuality through valuings, either externally or internally. And so if making love is not exactly the best term, I can see that it doesn't change anything in terms of the mechanics of the engine of the idea. It just means I used a bad word to describe FI sex.
Well, it does. It's not just a bad word. The whole motivation. I promise you, I've seen both types of FI DOMs use sex for non-FI purposes.
Okay, right. Well, then that's TE sex, potentially. Or it could be SI sex. You might be saying, well, they're getting off on their FE stuff, like I was saying. If that's the case, even then, you could say, if I'm an FI DOM, I've got ignoring FE, it may just sort of fire off on its own, without me really thinking of it as being FE, while still thinking of it as being FI, my own personal valuings of things. Now, obviously, none of us are trapped in our cognitive functions forever. I'm not saying we are. We're talking about general tendencies. And making love being the wrong term, if I say making FI or making feelings or feelings-based, internal feelings-based sex, neither you nor I really understands what's going on with FI people, even though you're with one, because we're polar to it. So it's really difficult for us to describe exactly what that is. But the fact that it doesn't interfere at all with the mechanics of the node.
Taxonomy, you're comfortable describing them the whole way through this thing. Okay, until now.
You did find a detail at the bottom of a node that needs to be changed. My point is it is at the bottom of a node. It doesn't affect the mechanics of anything because it's describing what FI sex is like. It doesn't change the fact that the symmetry works. It doesn't change the fact that there's FE sex is distinctly about hierarchies and statuses and stuff like that. That central point remains the same. The fact that I don't understand how introverted feelers feel their way through sex is the fact that I don't understand how introverted feelers feel their way through sex well enough to name it well within that node. That is a concern. It's something that does need to be changed. It's a valid critique, and it doesn't expand up and out. It collapses in terms of its impact. It's just how it
sex
is.
with an FE dom. How hierarchical is sex with an FE dom?
Taylor, what I'm saying,
not super hierarchical in experience.
What do you mean?
I will walk around the circle and I will cut down every one of them.
Okay, but
just because I only addressed one.
Stop. What do you mean by hierarchical?
That's a word you used twice now.
I want to make sure you're using it. I want to make sure we're using it the same way.
Okay, then define it.
Well, you just used it. How did you mean it?
I used it as a response. I use it. I mean, at all hierarchical. In charge? Who's in charge? Or who's
So which function is in charge?
Yeah. What I mean by that is sort of dominance, submission stuff, and or whatever other kind of weird that kind of stuff that goes on.
Kinky stuff.
And I will tell you that FE dom sex was kinky, but it wasn't particularly hierarchical at its core at all. Really.
Kinky sex should be any FE, right?
Okay,
yeah, well, I would certainly agree.
I mean,
I agree.
I'm not saying that the different types can't express sexuality through other functions that aren't their preferred ones. What I'm telling you is that if they do so, if an FI dom expresses through an FE form of sex, okay, but they're still expressing an FE form or an FI form or an SI form or an SE form.
So, Eric, whether I go big and say the whole thing doesn't make a better picture, or whether I go small and say this issue right here specifically, you keep shrinking the target.
No, I don't know. I don't actually. I conceded. Hold on, that's not true. Actually, let's go back on the flow. I conceded your point about the naming within the node. So I didn't shrink any targets there. I conceded a point and agreed it needed to be changed. And then in this next thing you're saying is you're giving me examples of individual people who run contrary to my expected predictions, right? Yes or no?
Right. So
that's basically your argument.
Yes.
Your whole argument then. Okay. So your whole argument is your example. No, Taylor, I'm trying to move us forward.
Taylor, he let you talk. Now let him talk.
I'm trying to establish what he said on the argument chain. I'm not going making new arguments myself. I'm repeating what he fucking said.
Do it. No, I do it.
So just repeat it. It's fine.
Okay, so you're giving examples, right, that contradict what my model says, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's your anecdotal evidence is relevant, but you're motivated to frame that evidence to be contradictory, regardless of the extent to which it is or not. It doesn't matter because that's not. You're seeking examples. You're seeking examples in contradiction, regardless. It's anecdotal.
I have examples.
Regardless,
and
it's
I got
anecdotal.
That's a good example. I mean, that's a good argument.
Regardless, it's anecdotal. And it doesn't actually disprove anything I'm saying. It just says my experience, as Taylor says, this conflicts with it, and I take that seriously. But again, where are you conflicting? You're conflicting on how these individuals express whether or not they are typical of their types or not is to be determined. You're trying to generate empirics where there are none. Once again, no actual empirics. Either way, don't prove anything either way.
Nothing is proven or disproven at all. There's nothing here that's proven or disproven. So it's impossible. It's like saying that you can't prove God doesn't exist.
No, it's not true. Like that, Taylor. Stop trying to collapse shit.
We need an ISFJ up in here. Julie's coming in. Her computer's
okay. So I was trying at first to say it doesn't work like that. In my experience, it's not. You can't parse in the sex down to a single functional experience and have it be accurate. And that was not specific enough. So then I started going through specific examples. I can go through more specific examples, but at some point I got to know which scale to attack this thing on that will be
Okay, well, you're
listened
giving
to.
me anecdotal examples that aren't disproving the model, okay? And you've successfully, though, convinced me with those anecdotal examples that I probably misnamed FI, okay? So that's the work that's been accomplished here. Now, what I'm saying is, it's to the extent that your arguments about shit collapsing down to mush are true of this, they're true of every experiential event in life, every truly subjective experiential event. And the fact is, we're doing objectivist work on it, it's necessarily approximating it. And the fact that you are using the approximate nature of the objects that we're using to parse something out to discount the validity of this because it's unparsable, distinctly unparsable because it's subjective particularist nature, well, that just consistent with what I'm saying in general about particularist and objectivist positions. So, I mean, that's not, you're not doing any work there rhetorically or on the argument chains. And that's just how it is. I mean, I'm not trying to, you always think I'm trying to win every argument, which I am, but in this case, I'm winning it because it is what I'm saying.
But Eric, can I ask you a question?
I don't think you're really winning, but go ahead.
What kind of question would you, or what kind of arguments would break your model? Could you think of any?
Give me an example of NI, NE, or TI or TE sex that is not linked to FI, FE units. Now, you could best be suited to do that with TE potentially, but
well, also, is there anything that could yield the framework unusable, of which we are dissecting this thing?
Well, sure, but then I mean, it's linked so heavily to something that's so well supported, which is my main taxonomical framework, and it's so well substantiated by simple utility. Now, in this case, Taylor's saying, well, this doesn't have simple utility. I'm applying it to my own experience, and it's not working. Okay, well, it's worth noting, but it's not. It's not definitive one way or the other.
Hold on. Does it matter if there is any people that do resonate with it and can link it to their own experience? Is that
well, sure. I mean, the thing is,
if nobody says I don't experience this the way that you're explaining it, I don't resonate with that based on my understanding.
It's not a description of the experience of sex.
I think sex inherently will either have FI or FE in it, or both.
It's a description of the modalities through which people experience sex.
Well, you said it's not a description of the experience of sex, but all sex is an experience.
Right. That's why it can't ever be that. All it can do is be as a description of the modalities, the object modalities through which people experience sex.
I've got one. I've got any sex right here.
All right,
I had sex with a girl just because her name was Taylor, and I thought that was fun. That's some fucking novelty right there. Going after a girl just because you got the same name as you and you wanted to say that.
Okay, that's
that's not like pure idiot. I don't know what it is.
That's why you decided to have sex.
I have an ex-girlfriend who had sex with somebody because she saw a rainbow and she knew that was from God telling her that it was okay to do something.
Guys,
that's
again,
NI.
You aren't talking about sex. Again, what you're doing is confirming this other model. Okay, what I said in this one, you're agreeing with me. Let me show you then, so you know you are. Okay, so we can prove that clearly.
Okay.
And put it to bed. You are definitely agreeing with me. So what we talk about here in this model is what NI does. The best way to sex it up, FE or FI style, single best way or single best reason to have sex would be fine. Here's some reasons why we should have sex, TI, possible ways of having sex, reasons to have sex, NE, how to have different ways to have sex, TE. All these things are ancillary supporting functions as indicated in this diagram to the core sex nodes. And in fact, they do the things you're describing, which is why I'm right.
Eric, I have a point. What about porn stars?
Well, I mean,
T.
T.
But look, the thing
pure
is,
TE.
once again, it's either listen though, but here because it's an excellent point. It's an excellent point, and it's the best ground you have so far. But it still doesn't hold much water, and I'll tell you why. It's because it's still talking about their motivation. That's why they're having sex, which is covered in the thing I say here. Okay, in the diagram it says that. It's out there in the answer. Why they're sex. If it is in fact the actual process of sex for them, then they've reduced sex to an experience of from an experience of sexuality to just a chore they're doing with their body.
Can you?
Well, I have a
on
few friends that
level.
are at.
Can you put that diagram online on a Facebook group or something? The one that you just.
Yeah, I think you can make a strong argument that at that point it's not sex at all.
Right,
Yeah, I actually have a few friends that are escorts, and they separate actually escorting and real sex, like real love. So I mean, to them, it's purely TE, right, or TI. There's no feeling in it at all. But in their actual partners, in real life, in like their real life, without having to work for it, it's all feeling.
And I think that's an example of how TE can't on its own make for authentic sex. Males can't even do that. You
Right.
know? If I decide to go have sex with somebody for purely economic gains and I'm not attracted to them at all and I don't want to do that and I'm feeling like really awkward, I'm just not going to get it up, you know? So
well, there are males that do that, and they use enhancers,
okay, well, fine. The point being, it might be possible to, but you can conceive of plenty of situations in which, like, if I'm being tasked to
the vast majority of sex involves FI,
go
FE.
fuck that dog right there, Eric. Then I'm gonna have problems doing that. You know, I'm gonna have problems successfully executing that task. So the thing is, it's worth noting that the TE aspect of things is it's possible to emulate the physical act of sex without really being for females in a way that is not necessarily for males. Now, I think there is a way to. I mean, men have fucked all sorts of things throughout history, so
No.
obviously.
How do we get AIDS?
Yeah, I think SE doms are just like, well, or maybe that's SI. I don't know. Maybe that's like my penis. I don't care what it's going into as long as it feels good.
Yeah. So I'm curious. Did I just win that argument, or is that not to be smug? I'm not at all. But the whole porn star thing.
I'm not disputing that's an important question. The argument about what?
Oh, okay. The whole porn star thing, how it's purely TI, TE, or excuse me, TE.
Yeah. I mean, look, it was kind of a wash in the sense that you won the argument in the sense that, yes, that is an expression of sex that is TE, but
it doesn't fit the most.
And it's not a desirable expression of sex. And it shows you how if you reduce sex to something that's not in one of those four things, then it becomes an ugly caricature of itself.
Yes, and in fact, most people that I know that do escorts are quite remorseful of it.
All right, well, I'm going to end this video now. I think that was a good fight. I enjoyed it. Thank you all for participating.